Welcome to Fisher Webinars. The following is a recording of Issues Keeping Tissue Executives Up at Night, or Should, originally recorded on Thursday, October 25th, 2018.
As Kelly mentioned, today we will be talking about the tissue industry. And before we jump into that, maybe a brief word. As you all know on the call, the tissue industry, as is the case for the rest of the pulp and paper industry worldwide, is very capital intensive and very complex. And because of that, the decisions that business leaders make are very consequential and oftentimes are high value. And so here at Fisher, we have a belief that because of that fact, you ought to have the best possible business intelligence to inform those decisions. And the way we do that is really through products and services that cover very detailed and complete information about the pulp and paper industry, complementary consulting services that include strategic consulting, and forecasting. And of particular note, we are very excited about our new next generation platform called FisherSolve Next. FisherSolve Next represents a significant investment into our database and analytical tool FisherSolve, and we've invested with a focus on improving ease of use, significant improvements to functionality for the product. So hopefully for some of you who are clients out there and those who are not, and certainly invite you to talk to your Fisher International representative about that. Okay, so with that being said, let's jump into today's topic. So as Kelly mentioned, the title of the webinar is Issues Keeping Tissue Executives Up at Night. And of course, there's probably dozens of issues that keep executives up at night. Today we're going to address four that are topical that we hear about quite often from our clients. We'll talk about pulp prices, trends in e-commerce, some words about new technology and new capacity, and finally we'll address some topics in sustainability with a specific emphasis on water. So let's jump into it. Let's talk about pulp prices and the question of integration. All right, just to give some background for those on the call, and many of you may know this, but what we've got here is a chart showing the average production costs by cost class for tissue producers worldwide. And as you can see, the lion's share of tissue production costs at the reel is fiber, with the next component being energy. And so this is all to say about 80% of a tissue producer's cost of production is fiber and energy. So obviously what happens with fiber prices is extremely important to executives. And what has happened to fiber prices is they have skyrocketed up over the last year and a half. This chart shows a price series from friends at Trade Tree Online. It measures northern bleached softwood kraft pulp prices, and this is indexed. So the way you read this is May 2016 equals 100. And what I want you to draw your eye to is this very dramatic run-up that we've seen since really the end of 2016, where pulp prices have gone from that index value of about 100 to just about 150, so almost a 50% increase in the prices for pulp. And this is having dramatic implications across the tissue industry worldwide, and moreover, it's not impacting all mills equally, and that's because some tissue mills are integrated to virgin pulp, some tissue mills are somewhat integrated to recycled pulp, and other mills are not integrated at all. And that can be seen in this chart by the different colors, which reflect the total tissue mills worldwide by region, by their site status. So all of these big green blocks, which we can see here, about half of Europe, a little under half of North America, and more than half in Asia, are full of non-integrated tissue mills. So more than half of the number of sites in Asia are non-integrated. Moreover, because of the ways mills operate and the different products they make and choices they've made, price increases don't impact all mills equally in terms of the final finished product cost. So this chart is case cost. So within FisherSolve, we have the capability to benchmark not only per ton cost, but also statistical case costs. So this is a case of tissue year-over-year change in cost between 2017 and 2018. And what you can see, I've picked 18 mills here from the United States. All of these mills are making very high quality consumer bath tissue, or what some might call in the industry ultra quality consumer bath tissue. And you can see that it's very lumpy. So some mills, this particular mill's cost changed about 7% due to the price increase, whereas this particular mill's cost changed over 16%. And when we see this in an industry, this non-uniform impact of an external event, that causes disruption because some mills are impacted much more than others. And we can see that on the cost curve. So this chart shows a cost curve with which many of you are probably familiar with. We have the total capacity for bath tissue in North America on this axis. Each bar represents a mill. The height of the bar is, again, that mill's cost. This time, again, we're back in case cost units. And the bar is colored by whether it's a virgin integrated, non-integrated, or recycled integrated mill. This particular curve is from Q2 2017, so about a year ago, and I want to draw your attention to what has happened as pulp prices have increased. What we can see if we go to a more recent cost curve, this is again the same population of mills. There has been this break in the cost curve, or a shelf that's created as higher pulp prices have pushed up costs for this part of the cost curve, while those mills that are recycled integrated or virgin integrated have remained relatively lower in cost. And this difference is about $1.50 per case, which is very significant, as many of you know. Moving over to China, here's another cost curve. This time I'm doing this particular curve on dollars per metric ton. A couple of things to draw your attention to. One, China's cost curve is very steeply sloped. This is very common in quickly developing markets, and steep sloped cost curves have implications in terms of market dynamics, which we can save for another webinar. But what I want to draw your attention to again is in the red here, these bars are integrated to pulp mills, and as you can see, a dramatically lower cost for some of these mills compared to the bulk of the industry. So certainly in today's high pulp price environment, these mills have a significant cost advantage. Moving over to Europe, again, another cost curve. This time the bars are colored to represent different mills and the country that they reside in. What's interesting about Europe, you recall there is some virgin integrated capacity in Europe, but it's smaller than any other region in the world. Moreover, the cost curve is very flat, particularly through the middle here with these green bars, which is Italy. And so because of that, there has not been as significant of an impact in Europe, although certainly some of these folks in the fourth quartile are undoubtedly feeling pressure today. And the impacts aren't just unique to regions either. It's also unique to the technology one uses to manufacture tissue. So this chart shows U.S. consumer toweling. The x-axis is the cost of manufacture. The color of the bubbles, of which the bubble size is the amount of tissue production, tells you whether the machine is using advanced pressing technology, so like a TAD type of process, or more conventional pressing process. And as you can see, again, a year ago, pretty well distributed in terms of cost of manufacturing. This y-axis is economic viability. That is the risk of a mill closing. It's a model that we have in FisherSolve that predicts quite accurately how likely a mill is to survive. Mills that are up here are more at risk. Mills down here are less at risk. And so the way you read this chart is this population are low risk and also lower cost mills. If we forward again a year, what you can see that I think is quite interesting is we have a pool now of conventional technology machines that has occupied sort of this space in the middle where both high risk and higher cost. Okay, now switching gears a little bit as we talk about integration. Many might ask the question, why, if this is the case that you have a cost advantage, why don't more companies integrate? Well, let's talk about that a little bit. Well, first of all, one of the issues that many folks in the industry talk about is the scale involved with pulp mills. So this chart shows the average tons per year per fiber line built over the last 20 or 30 years. It turns out recently it's about 400,000 tons per year or so is the average size of new fiber lines. And contrast that with the average annual production of tissue machines installed in the U.S., which is about a tenth of that size. And so you definitely have a case where if you were going to build a greenfield pulp integrated tissue operation, you have a bit of a mismatch because you need 10 tissue machines on average to match scale with a world-class sized fiber line. So that is an obstacle for some. Moreover, most tissue worldwide is made with a blending of different furnishes and species. What this chart shows is typical furnish mixes for various tissue grades. You can see bath tissue, towel, and their qualities. Ultra premium value economy. Those are terms commonly used in North America, at least, to describe tissue qualities. And really what I just want to draw your eye to is that tissue manufacturers, when they're making decisions to meet certain product performance characteristics, are blending fibers to meet those characteristics. And so again, if you're trying to integrate and you're only making softwood pulp, you may still have to buy hardwood to get particular product performance, and vice versa. But that's all to say, one thing you might consider is, do you really have to physically integrate to get the benefits of pulp integration? So what this chart shows is EBITDA margins for two publicly traded producers, and these EBITDA margins are indexed. So we have profits here over here starting in Q3 2016. Orange is a pulp producer, and purple is a tissue producer. And so something I want you to think about is you may be able to get what's called a synthetic integration, meaning you get the benefits of integration in that if pulp prices rise and that causes profits in your tissue business to fall, you make them up in your pulp business. So it could be for some business leaders that investing in the pulp space can get some of the benefits or nearly all of the benefits of being physically integrated. So with that being said, what are some other questions that might keep us up at night relative to pulp integration? Well, first of all, the pulp industry has been consolidating. This can be seen on this chart, which goes back to 2007. Each line, it represents a company, and as you can see in the forecast, these bars have gotten thicker, which signals that the industry is consolidating. So certainly a question could be, what will happen with pulp prices as the industry consolidates? The second point is that a question that you might have is, will integration be necessary to survive like it has in printing and writing? So what this chart shows is that in printing and writing, the orange mills, this orange line, which is virgin integrated mills, have done much better in terms of share than non-integrated mills. Also, there's some talk now in the market about low-cost pulp producers, say in Brazil or Indonesia, exporting tissue? Well, it turns out it's already happening. So this shows you Indonesian tissue exports by country. The U.S. is around 300,000 tons, and you can see that that trend has been growing over time. Finally, there's been some improvements in non-wood pulping. Non-wood pulping is not a new thing for our industry. You could probably go back to the Egyptians and make an argument that the original paper was created with non-wood pulp. There are at least 3 non-wood pulp projects coming into fruition in North America, one starting in Washington State, where I live, this December. And so it could be that there's other technology advancements that also relieve this pressure. All right, so switching gears a little bit, we're now going to move on to this topic of e-commerce and its impact on the tissue market. So first of all, for background, as many of you probably know, e-commerce has grown quite rapidly. It's averaged about 15% year over year of retail. And if that continues in 10 or 15 short years, it will equal about 30% of retail, at least in the US. Other parts of the world, it's actually higher. E-commerce is penetrated at a higher level than it has in the US. And up to this point, much of that penetration is incurred in goods that you'd probably think of when you think of e-commerce, so books and magazines and electronics, office supplies, software, and not so much in consumer packaged goods, which is where tissue lives. And so certainly as e-commerce continues to grow, it's going to have to grow in those areas. Moreover, the big e-commerce companies are making it easier for us to buy stuff online. This can see on this chart, which is Prime memberships in the United States. It turns out today there's almost 100 million of us that subscribe to Amazon Prime. Swinging over to China, they already buy lots of consumer packaged goods online. You can see this chart which shows sales of e-commerce for various product categories. Skin moisturizers over $3 billion and is growing at really double-digit growth rate. So this is something that is happening worldwide. And here in the US, Amazon is diligently focusing on attacking the grocery market. So they've launched Pantry and Fresh, which is all geared towards taking more share in grocery, which is a huge market for them. And in some ways, they're doing it with strategies that kind of blur the line between brick and mortar and e-commerce. So they now offer the ability to order and pick up at Whole Foods, which they bought, I think, a year or 2 years ago. They can deliver with Fresh. And now the latest thing is this treasure truck product, which is basically daily deals. So they text you a daily deal. This truck drives around kind of like a ice cream truck, and you run out of your house and go meet it. Again, so certainly big investment, big focus in growing in the grocery business. And it's not just the new e-commerce players that are getting in on the action, also the traditional retailers are doing it too. So we can see here pickup points for Walmart and Kroger have grown dramatically. This is where you order, make an order online. You basically go to a drive-up window or a parking spot at the grocery store and grab your products. And because of all these investments, it's predicted that e-commerce is going to grow dramatically from a relatively lower base, 20 billion, this is e-commerce grocery spend, to about $100 billion by 2024. Now, why all this focus? Well, this is what we believe. One, if you think about why this focus in grocery and why tissue would be important for those trying to grow e-commerce and grocery, tissue's non-perishable. You can put it in your pantry. You buy it every week. At least in America and probably most parts of the world, every household buys it. So it's this device that allows e-commerce companies to really get you used to buying fast-moving consumer goods online. So it's this consumer path, or what many of the brick and mortar retailers might call a trip driver. It causes you to go to the storefront. And we actually have a video of how this might work in the connected home. This is a video of the Amazon Echo, or some of you might think of as Alexa.
Alexa, order me some toilet paper.
One moment.
I can help you get toilet paper from Whole Foods or from Amazon. Would you like it from Whole Foods?
No.
Here's what I found. Presto, Ultra Soft toilet paper, 24 count.
This is an actual case study that my wife did. So she asked Amazon's Echo device, our Echo device, to order some toilet paper. Amazon offered, asked her to either buy it at Whole Foods or if she wanted to buy it directly from Amazon. We said, well, no, we don't want to buy it from Whole Foods. Let's buy it from Amazon, and let's see what Echo or Amazon provided as an option. They provided this Presto Ultra Soft toilet paper product. This may be hard for you to see in your computer screens, but that's a picture of the Presto branded toilet paper, which is it's Amazon's private label brand. So again, back to this chart I showed you before, very deep penetration, prime 100 million households in the US, and we've got a situation where they're basically able to offer their private label brand first. And we've done some looking into the Presto brand. This is Amazon's private label brand. It's a very good quality product. It's made with advanced pressing technology, and it's growing very rapidly. This is a product they launched Q4 last year. Basically, within a couple of weeks, it already reached number 6 in their category of tissue, which really is pretty amazing when you consider that they're going up against branded giants that have been making and selling tissue for decades. So pretty astonishing growth. So with that being said, what are some questions about e-commerce that you might consider going forward? Well, the question I just raised. So we've got a situation where more consumers are going to e-commerce. Certainly there's been investment and focus to have consumer packaged goods as part of your e-commerce lifestyle. That includes tissue. Well, when that happens, private label is going to grow, could grow. In the US, private label tissue is 30% of the market, much lower than it is in Europe, for example. So a question you might ask is, of the traditional players in some of these markets, who wins and who loses as this trend continues? Another question you might ask is, how will those preferences change packaging, right? So obviously delivering directly to home has different packaging requirements than delivering to retail. So it turns out that the market probably will adjust to accommodate that. And finally, does that provide an opportunity for producers? We've done a lot of work in packaging, and as you can imagine, the packaging that you use for a product has an awful lot of impact on the purchase. Something that many folks think about when we talk about e-commerce is, well, you can't make the last mile, it's too hard. Freight costs are much higher, so it's not going to work. I'm not sure what everybody is considering, though, also in that argument is that if you went to an e-commerce model where you have far fewer warehouse locations than you do in the current brick and mortar model, which there's about 40,000 grocery stores in the US versus 200 Amazon fulfillment centers, it turns out the reduction in working capital, if you think about how many inventories you need to satisfy warehouses and 40,000 grocery stores and wholesalers and et cetera, it's 90% lower in an e-commerce model. So whereas you may have differences in that last mile freight costs, you have a dramatic reduction in inventories and working capital required. All right, so moving on to technology. So first of all, there's big differences worldwide in terms of choices. This chart shows average tons per year by region for tissue machines. You can see in Asia, which has been rapidly growing, less than half even the average size tissue machine than in Europe and North America. I mentioned advanced versus conventional pressing technology. This map shows the share of total talent tissue capacity since 2000. Dark green is advanced technology. You can see it turns out it seems like those preferences are mostly in North America and a few countries, whereas in the rest of the world we still like conventional pressing technology. In the US, that trend is clear. These bars show you the number of tissue machines built over the last decade or so by type, and you can see overwhelmingly they have been of the advanced variety. And there's several different choices out there in terms of technology approaches and models by machine builders, and at least in the US, you can see that more than half of those machines since 2010 have been of a particular brand. So it does seem a particular model, so it does seem that at least many tissue mills are gravitating towards one type of equipment supplier and process. And the choices that you make around technology can have dramatic implications for your costs. So this chart shows all the tissue and towel machines in North America. We have fiber costs on the x-axis, high, low, energy costs on the y-axis, high, low. And as many of you know, in many cases, advanced forming or advanced pressing machines have some significant advantages, can have advantages in product performance characteristics, but also oftentimes you can use less fiber at a cost of higher energy use to get those product performance characteristics. So these are all the considerations that owners need to take when making these choices. Okay, so what are some questions that you might keep you up at night? In many parts of the world, tissue segments are categorized by product quality from very high quality to economy or lower quality, and these vary by region. In the US, we tend to have a much higher preference for ultra quality or higher quality products. But these are going to change. These are going to change both as technology becomes more available and as trends like e-commerce take hold. And so as machine owners and tissue leaders, you need to understand where that is going to make the appropriate choices. Something that's very exciting is the growth in China. China's already put in over 1,000 tissue machines in the last 10 years. This chart shows China's wealth on the x-axis versus its total tissue consumption. So you can see they're much lower on per person tissue consumption, but also lower wealth. As China grows, their demand for tissue will certainly grow and really explode, if you will. We're predicting, upwards of 1,000 more, 2,000 more tissue machines that would be needed to satisfy the growth. So a big question for suppliers out there is what kind of technology will be used, who's going to buy that technology as China and other developing countries grow. Okay, finally, maybe something a little bit far afield, but this is a patent that we've pulled recently. And so this is really future looking, but there's actually been investments and a patent filed to completely change the game in tissue. So going from a traditional fiber formed web to really extruded starch. So think about printing tissue with a extruded starch solution. All right, so as we wrap up our webinar, we'll take a few moments to just address sustainability issues and water. So first of all, here's a chart from our friends at NALCO. Water is becoming a serious issue worldwide, as you can read from the chart. By 2030, we're going to need more water, more energy, more food, and water will exceed supply by 25%. And it turns out that businesses are seeing this as a big risk. Survey of business leaders across industries, not just pulp and paper, reveal that 70% of business leaders see water issues as a substantive business risk to their companies. And it turns out, looking at FisherSolve, this is a screenshot of FisherSolve showing the average water volume by site technical age. So what you're seeing basically is probably what you'd expect is older tissue mills, older tissue machines use much more water than those are newer. So certainly as we look outside at the fleet of tissue mills worldwide, big differences in efficiency and water use, which we believe are going to be increasingly more important, particularly if you tend to be in a water-stressed area. So again, another chart from FisherSolve. Each one of these blue pins is a tissue mill worldwide. The color of the country is the risk due to water issues. And as you can see, again, back to this concept of disruption, there's some mills who are in regions where water isn't as much of an issue, whereas we've got certainly other parts of the world where it's a huge issue that's going to impact those tissue companies' business. And that can be seen on this final chart. So again, back to this mill viability concept. Risk is over here, low risk mill here, and then we've got water risk for the area that the mill is in on this axis. And what we think is that for some mills where you're already at risk because of your technology and age, you're going to face a dual risk, whereas other mills are positioned much better, much more strongly. Okay, so as we're wrapping up, we've quickly covered 4 issues here. Certainly we could take much longer to cover each one of these and more. We'd certainly invite you to talk to us after the webinar if you have an interest in these topics or others. But as we close, just something for you to consider, and maybe to bookend this presentation with the remarks I said at the beginning. If you think about these issues, they could all be a threat or an opportunity, and really the difference is your company's understanding of these issues, these trends, and the potential impact of the business, and what you're going to do about it. Some of which might be more important to you than others. You need to know that. And to quote Wayne Gretzky, a hockey legend, the idea here is to skate to where the puck is going to be, right? And so the idea here is to use these are issues and opportunities that can be understood, and you can plan your business to take advantage of them. So the question we'd leave everybody as we close up is, as we've covered these issues and think for your own businesses, do you have enough information and understanding to make the strategic choices that best position your business, yourself, for these trends in tissue? And with that, certainly thank you for your time.